Joining us now, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, president and founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy and author of the book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim's patriot's fight to save his faith. Zuhdi Jasser Skyping in from Phoenix, Arizona this morning. Zuhdi, what do you make of Howard Dean's comments?
I just am flabbergasted, and you wonder if these people ever would listen to their own comments. Do they really think the American people are that foolish that, with all these attacks, the parliament in Ottawa, beheadings in Oklahoma, hundreds of school kids killed in Pakistan, Boko Haram in Nigeria, ISIS in Syria, this is something he can dismiss? I mean, not to mention, is Howard Dean now an imam? How does he know? And the bottom line is they're facilitating a denial. And I used to think it was just Muslims that needed an intervention in our denial, but it appears that the left needs an intervention, and they just want to continue the apologetics because they want to push the narrative that it's not a problem, it's just a crime issue, and that they haven't failed. But the narrative really is the fact that we have surrendered to radical Islam, and they're spreading, appeasement isn't working, and what they're doing, the comments from Governor Dean marginalize the work of moderate Muslims that want to reform our faith, because once you say it's not Islam, you let the Islamists dominate our faith community.
Zuhdi, you have been outspoken on this issue for years, calling for a reformation of Islam. Apparently, you have some company, at least what I read in the papers, involving the president of Egypt, calling for much the same thing. Why the reticence, or the apparent reticence here in the United States, to have moderate Muslims, law-abiding Muslims, stand up and rally against Islamic terrorism?
Well, the dictators in the Middle East that are secular are starting to understand that this monster they helped fuel is coming to bite them in the derriere. So they're starting to look at, well, we need to reform. Now, presidents like the military dictator of Egypt don't really offer any solutions. They don't use the word liberty. They don't talk about the end of the Islamic State because they prefer an oligarchical control of the Islamic State. And the solution needs to come from the West. And unfortunately, presidents like Obama and other EU leaders don't want to deal with it because it involves having a strategy. It involves courage. It involves taking on an establishment of 56 Muslim majority countries that control petrodollars and have huge influence and lobbying organizations in Washington that they don't want to take on. And ultimately, they just want to withdraw and become isolationists, which is exactly what the Islamists want. They don't believe in American exceptionalism. So as a result of that, they're letting us reformists flounder, and they're using the advice of the Muslim Brotherhood operatives in Washington instead.
Let's drill down some on that, because there's been a lot of talk, but I consider you the absolute authority on this. Muslim Brotherhood operatives. Are you willing to name names this morning? Are there people within this administration who you believe are operatives of the Muslim Brotherhood?
Well, I think that our typical one just left a few months ago. His name is Mohammed al-Bieri. He was an advisor to the Homeland Security Council. You look him up. He ran an organization called Freedom and Justice Organization, which happens to be the same name as the Brotherhood, and really had a lot of apologetics about Sayyid Qutb and other ideas. There are individuals like Jasser from the Al-Maghrib Institute in Houston that has significant influence. Now, he's not in the administration, but the issue is not necessarily that they're members of the party per se, but ideologically, they might as well be. They're Islamists. And if you look at the policies of the Obama administration and even comments like Howard Dean's, those are basically what the Brotherhood wants the West to say, is that stay away from Islam, stay away from the issue. It's ours to dominate, and don't listen to the reformists. So, whether I can name names or not, they're obviously affecting the policy, because that's what we see before us as Americans, is a pro-Islamist policy that's marginalizing the need for reform and to engage the issues of jihad and Islamism as being the greatest threat of the 21st century.
Of course, the attack on the French satirical publication yesterday came, we believe, out of what apparently some considered blaspheming the Prophet Muhammad. Is it the responsibility of media worldwide to be respectful of other faiths And should they abridge their content, not print things considered blasphemous? Is it hypocritical, for example, that you see images here in the United States castigating Christianity and Judaism that could be considered inflammatory, yet no violence is threatened against publications that do that?
I mean, that should be a motivation for Muslims to say, you know, we have a problem when you have political and intellectual leaders infantilizing Muslims because somehow we need to be treated with kid gloves because you have a president who says, you know, the future is not for those who blaspheme against the prophet, where in fact we see no similar protections for Christians and Jews and what they hold sacred. Not to mention, as a Muslim, I'm not sure I want, you know, I think any faith deserves the respect of global leadership if it can't be criticized, and if it can't take the criticism, that means somehow it doesn't, you know, have that personal relationship with God that it wants to protect. I mean, even the New York Times had an op-ed yesterday called, you know, the blasphemy we need, where it said the speech that really defines liberalism is that speech which incites violence. The speech that doesn't really define liberty. And I think when you have the New York Times making op-eds like that, you know that this is really one of the cornerstones of our society. And I think the president needs to read his own newspaper.
30 seconds remain. To the attack yesterday in Paris, early reports, some people talked about lone wolves. You came out with a strong comment. You're suspicious of that whole lone wolf operation notion, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that whole lone wolf thing we need to throw out the window. They are no more lone wolves than the Ebola virus that we treated in the U.S. had nothing to do with Liberia and Africa, where it came from. So these ideologies are coming out of the Middle East, out of radical Islam in every part of the world that they live, and it's all connected to a common ideology that we need to have a strategy to defeat, and we don't.
Fair enough. The name of the book is A Battle for the Soul of Islam, An American Muslim Patriot's Fight to Save His Faith. The author, Dr. M. Zuhdi Jasser, from whom we just heard. Dr. Jasser, thanks for your time. A Newsmax Now update is next.